Hi, welcome to the third edition of the Book DNA Project. Today we're going to be discussing fairy tales. Now, I haven't specifically spoken of any of these books in the last two episodes. I, really started out reading just any book that really called to me. And as I, became older, 7, 8 years old, I really started to discover that there were certain authors that called to me, certain types of stories that really seemed to resonate. And I loved the tales of, of legend. I loved a tale that had some type of moral or lesson learned. It spoke of the culture, of the time and the country where it originated. And so I was really drawn to those books that not only talked about social behavior, but lessons learned, things that could be easily captured, or while easily captured, not necessarily digested as easily. The complex thoughts, reading between the lines. So the first book to kind of capture, or the first series to kind of capture that type of moral lesson learned in more than one book, more than one story, were the Serendipity book series by Stephen Cosgrove, illustrated by Robin James. Now, I loved these books primarily, not necessarily for the story, but the beautiful illustrations by Robin James, just absolutely gorgeous. I'm a worrier, and I was even worse when I was a kid. And my mom would tell me to shut my eyes and think of the enchanted forest. And so I built this place in my mind for me to escape. And somehow it seemed to look exactly like the images, that the illustrations in these books. Now, these books are hard to find. I do try to capture them in any type of book sale, anything that I can get my hands on. But also at the end of each story, it's a very short story, there is the last page that captures what that story is about. For instance, this one. As we look around us, at our mortal side and sigh, remember a place called Wingsong, then lift your wings and fly. Something incredibly simple, just that sums up the entire story. You don't necessarily have to read between the lines in this particular series, but it was really good to kind of set the stage for those fairy tales, short stories that would later capture that same spirit. So next on the list is Shel Silverstein, which, I can remember never being able to check out the book When the Sidewalk Ends. It was always checked out, but the book that really seemed to resonate with me was The Giving Tree. And I absolutely adored that book because it made me wonder every single time that I read, what would the older Lauren say to the younger Lauren? What things, what choices was I making at a younger age that would affect the rest of my life? So I'm really bad about living in the moment, and it's books like that that have me thinking about and reflecting upon the choices that I've made. But it also led me to books and collections by Shel Silverstein that were not, part of the normal run. One of my favorites is Runny Babbitt, and I think because it's a silly book, and it has silly words of cute little stories of this bunny rabbit and his family and all the mischief that he gets into. But it doesn't, it doesn't necessarily, because it's silly phrases, roll off your tongue. So you have to think about what you're saying, why you're saying it, and what type of adventures. It really just causes you to think about the story, the plot line of the collection. It's a cute little book. Next one on the list is, The Bremen Musicians. There we go. This story was read to me several times, and I knew that the Grimm brothers had composed this particular tale, and I wanted to get my hands on more of these types of tales, and so I completely ate up the Grimm's complete fairy tales. And I pick times actually to read the collections of tales. Um, Usually every, 3 to 5 years, I pick up the complete Grimm set and start to flip through and think of I gain a new perspective every single time I read one of the tales. And I think, oh, that really, that lesson learned could have served me then or can serve me differently in the future. It's interesting to see how your perspective of those morals change as you grow older. Some things, you're really quick to brush aside. So I encourage you to, pick up these fairy tales, pick up legends of old and start rereading. Don't think you know the tale because of a Disney classic that's come out. Don't read the sanitized versions. Fairy tales were out there, were written to to verbally express lessons learned, warnings, things to help us become of age and understand the times and put meaning to items that or social behaviors, um, things that weren't easily digestible, um, things that were hard to comprehend or difficult. So I encourage you to, pick up the Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales. Take a read. So the next tale that spurred me to read everything in the collection was The Tale of Peter Rabbit. And I had, as a kid growing up in England, you couldn't escape Beatrix Potter. And it was great because I was able to take this wonderful land, this wonderful universe that Beatrix Potter had created. And it was like I could open up a portal and as a kid, escape on the English countryside and pretend I was surrounded by Benjamin and by Miss Tiggywinkle. And it was just one of the best ways to experience the land, the culture that you live in. And last but not least, and this one's an old beaten up book, I no longer have the cover to it, but this is the Hans Christian Andersen Complete Fairy Tale. And I first started reading Hans Christian Andersen because of The Snow Queen. I absolutely loved that tale. It really just the juxtaposition of the children being so innocent and warm and happy with the coldness of the Snow Queen. There were so many things buried in that tale that I began to realize that not only was some type of moral being lesson learned being expressed in these tales, but it helped me to read between the lines and understand the context of why these lessons learned were being distributed, being vocalized, being written. So I encourage you to go back through your fairy tale collection, not the Disney version, but pick up Grimm's, pick up Hans Christian Andersen, look at Beatrix Potter. These short stories are not short on the impact, on the lessons learned that they convey. So with that, I hope all of you have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week for another edition of the Book DNA Project.